I'm Harry Cole, political editor of The Sun, and this is Never Mind The Ballots. And they're off. Well, what's left of them anyway? The Tory leadership contest has officially begun. The fourth contest in just 5 years. But is anyone listening? Does anyone care? Meanwhile, stateside, the race for the White House gets dirty as the Republican Party throws everything it can at Kamala Harris. She's now inched a 2-point lead against Trump in the latest polls. And the Prime Minister? Well, comrades, the hat is back. I have news of another great purge in the Labour ranks, executed by ruthless General Secretary Starmer. 7 rebel MPs have been suspended overnight for voting against the new government on the 2-child benefit cap. Former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, gone. Fellow Corbynistas Rebecca Long-Bailey, Zara Sultana and Ian Byrne, purged. Backbench moron Richard Bergen, also gone. Absina Begum, Imran Hussain, Ian Byrne, they're all gone, pending a review of good behaviour. I have to say, it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch. But first, nominations for the next leader of the Conservative Party are open, and those running will need the backing of at least 10 MPs to make the shortlist. James Cleverly was first out the gate, but who else might be throwing their hat in the ring? Meanwhile, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is preparing to take a ginormous swing at the Tories' handling of the economy as she softens up the ground for potential tax rises in the autumn. Joining to discuss all of that, former Treasury Minister Gareth Davies, Conservative MP. Gareth, Rachel Reeves says you didn't just fix the roof while the sun was shining, you burnt the whole building down. What happened?
It's a good try, isn't it? I mean, quite incredible, the brass neck, really, given the inheritance that we had when we came in.
15 years ago now.
Well, absolutely, but it is, if we're talking about inheritance, let's talk about inheritance. You know, inflation is now at 2%. When we came in, it was 3.4% under Labour. When we came in, unemployment was at 8%. It's now down to 4.4%. So we could keep going on about these statistics, but clearly we're now the fastest growing economy in the G7.
After
the economy
some pretty sluggish years there.
It's been tough through the pandemic and the energy shock as a result of Ukraine. Of course it has. And we've always said that the really high inflation that we experienced, 11% inflation, was always going to be our top priority because that affects everybody across the country. And we executed a plan which saw that come down to 2%.
If everything's so rosy and everything's so great, why did the PM go early? Surely you would have waited for all this glorious economic news before you went to the country.
Well, there's no doubt that the economy turned a corner. It has turned a corner, and that's clear for everybody to see. But there are other factors to consider when you're Prime Minister as to whether you should call an election, and that was the decision.
It wasn't a great result, though, was it? It wasn't a great decision, clearly, because you got Tonking.
Well, it was a terrible result for my party. We lost the support and trust of literally millions of people across the country, and now we've got to focus on how we get those back, how we rebuild, reunite, and ensure that we rebuild the trust. So
let's talk about Rachel Reeves and what she's up to. You were in the Treasury until, 3 weeks ago? She's going to come out on Monday, Tuesday, possibly, and do this, oh my God, look what we found. We looked under the bonnet, the horror stories. We're actually 50 billion more in the red than we thought. She's got a point, though, isn't she? You were putting off a lot of long-term spending decisions on blood, on defence, on all sorts of things, the post office payouts, public sector pay. You kicked it down the road for them to fix, didn't you?
Well, I'll deal with those specifics in a second.
Yeah.
But just on this notion that you come into office and all of a sudden you open these sort of magic books and see new things, it's just not true. After we introduced the Office for Budget Responsibility, the books are open, as Paul Johnson at the IFS has said. There's no hidden secrets. It's there for everybody to see. We've been clear what this is all about throughout the general election. This is about rolling the pitch for what we know is coming, and that's tax rises.
But not on the headline taxes of VAT, income tax, national insurance.
Yeah, there's quite a few other taxes that they've not ruled out. And all we're saying is, it would have been good for the British public to know a bit more about what they were planning.
Isn't the truth that the Tories would have been in exactly the same position if you'd won the election and looking at, far from being able to cut tax again in the autumn as you promised in your manifesto. Jeremy Hunt admitted at the weekend, that wouldn't have been possible. So you've boxed them in here, haven't you?
Well, during the general election, just to clarify this, we said that we wanted to essentially abolish national insurance.
Yes.
Right? But we always said we'd have to do that when fiscal conditions allowed us to do it. To your point earlier, there are a number of commitments, whether it's defence spending, infected blood inquiry, post office.
These are 10 billion, 15 billion, 20 billion
huge sums.
At a time.
The reason we didn't execute on that sooner is because we clearly had to wait for the inquiries and the reports to come out before we could act. But clearly, if we'd have got into government, got re-elected, we would have dealt with that. But yes, I'm not saying that the fiscal situation is not still to a certain degree, challenging when it comes to the level of debt in our economy. We've always been clear about that because we've built up so much debt through COVID, supporting families and businesses in the way that we did. So we've always been honest about that, but we were also clear that the thing that was hurting the economy the most was really high inflation, which pushed up interest rates, which meant that our debt interest was so high that it was unacceptable to us, and that's why we prioritised that.
You're Rachel Reeves. Just imagine for a moment. What taxes would you put up? How would you do it? How would you fix this mess?
Well, we set out during the general election a series of ways in which we can save money, whether it's through our welfare.
We've heard it so many times. Money down the back of the sofa, civil servants efficiency. Come on, if it was that easy, you would have done it years ago.
And we did do it. So if you take welfare, since 2010, we actually did cut 12 billion from welfare, and we had plans to do that again. If you look at tax avoidance, we actually put in measures with HMRC to recoup lost taxes, and that was 5 billion.
Why didn't you do it 5 years ago?
So but this is Harry. This is the thing.
If the money's there, the savings are there.
We thought we could go further for sure, but we wanted to continue what we were already doing. We were already having these savings. We were already finding ways in which we could tackle welfare fraud, for example. But of course, we wanted to go further, and we costed that, and that would have spent, money on defence, for example, which Labour is still not committing to.
But so what? We read during the campaign in The Guardian. I know I don't like to name check The Guardian, but I end up doing it every time on this show. With a great piece in The Guardian that basically had a shadow cabinet minister saying, "Look, we're going to put up 13 different taxes. Which ones do you think are going to go up, and which ones do you think are going to hurt the most?"
Well, look, we'll wait and see. This is what we are.
Capital gains tax, presumably.
We urgently need Labour to
with
clarify this, right? Because they didn't want to say it during the general election. Fine. They're now in government.
But which would you do? Which ones would you do if you had to? Gun to the head, you've got to put up taxes. Which ones are going to hurt the least?
Harry, I don't think you need to. As I say, I think you are able to reduce spending and reduce, the amount of spend, for example, on welfare and to recoup losses to tax avoidance. I think you don't necessarily need to do that. What the elephant in the room here is that Labour have committed to so many different spending pledges that they need to, right? So Rachel Reeves likes to talk a good game about, everything's fully costed, but if that's the case, then surely we're not going to see tax rises.
Right, enough of that. Let's talk about the politics, the naked, raw politics of Tory leadership election. Fourth contest in 5 years. I've done so many of these now. Who are you backing? Are you running? Do you fancy a tilt yourself?
Absolutely not. But I've yet to make.
You seem like a nice, upstanding chap.
That's very kind.
Why not have a crack? Everyone else seems to be having a go.
No, look, we have to rebuild. We have to reunite. We have to have a candidate and a leader in place who can do those things and offer a clear vision as to how we recoup, the millions of votes that we lost.
It's a bit strange though, having Rishi Sunak give a conference speech, respond to potentially the budget in October or whenever that is. There's not time to cannot speed this thing up. Why are you dragging it out for months?
Well, I think there's no rush. We've got to get this right. Of course we do. Given the scale of defeat, I think nobody's necessarily suggesting that we should just rush into this. We have to first understand why it is that we lost so many votes, and then figure out a path forward and the person that can lead us. And that requires a pretty decent, lengthy, thorough discussion, and also to include the members.
Who are you going to back?
I haven't decided yet.
So James Cleverly's out the traps. Nice little slick video last night.
So we know he's in the running.
Robert Jenrick's, imminent. You a Suella fan? What about Suella?
So I will come to a conclusion, a definitive conclusion for sure, but I want to see who's running first, and until they nominate, I don't think it's right.
What about your old mate Mel Stride? He's a good Treasury man. What about him?
So the thing is, I think everybody that's been floated in the press are very good people, very talented, experienced individuals who would do a good job. But we need to come to an assessment as members of Parliament, as to who can genuinely rebuild that trust, reunite the party, and offer an alternative government.
Where are you on the other great elephant in the room of what the earth does the Tory party do about Nigel Farage and reform? You lost 5 million potential votes, 4.5 million potential votes. We're up for grabs on the right. They've gone. You're bleeding out to the Lib Dems on the left. How do you bind those two things together? They're presumably quite contradictory.
So it's exactly the right way to frame this. We did lose votes to reform, millions, but we also lost a lot of good colleagues to the Liberal Democrats. And it's not as simple as left or right. It's not as simple as this policy or that policy. For me, it comes down to values and what we stand for as a party that runs through the core of our policies.
Sounds like you're running.
I'm absolutely not. I think most MPs feel this way, which is we do need to have a very clear message for the electorate that is founded, strong foundation in values that say we want to push people up who want to succeed, not pull them down when they do succeed, which is what Labour will do.
But in the reality, it's all, good, nice summer, nice summer of reflection and talking. But when it comes down to it, what are you going to do about Farage? Is there a way for him is there a merger in the offing? Is there a way you can try and, bring him into the fold? Do you go hard against him? How would you handle Farage?
I think that the first thing to say is Nigel Farage is definitely a prominent figure in our political landscape.
Yeah.
I think anybody that denies that is not being genuine about it. But for me, those people who went to reform, certainly from the Conservative Party, went because they lost trust in us.
Yeah.
And because they, frankly, it wasn't just about immigration, although that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
It was about other things too, about feeling left out, left behind. And we need to address that very seriously. But what I would say is that to a lot of the people that were flirting with reform in my patch during the election, those who were definitive and said they wanted to go to reform, they share our values in a lot of respects.
Don't like you guys. That's the problem.
And that's why we've got to rebuild. That's why we've got to reunite and have a common mission, with the foundation of common values, which I think the British public, broadly share. We are the most successful, longest-standing political party in the world.
I know, but often it takes you 30 years to come back and rejuvenate after historic. Let's not talk about the Corn Laws, but we could. It takes you 10 years to come back, and it's going to be a long old stint in opposition, isn't it?
Well, not necessarily. I don't think it has to be. We've seen in recent years that the electorate is incredibly fluid. We also know that the Labour Party have won a significant and decisive victory. But it is a loveless victory. We do know that a lot of these Labour members of Parliament have quite thin majorities. They got in a lot of them got in because of tactical voting. It looks like.
So back in 5 years.
If you have a prominent message, a strong
yes or no, back in 5 years.
I think it's entirely doable, but we have to have a leader who can reunite us and offer that message to the country that we're an effective government again.
Gareth Davies, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Never Mind The Ballots. Come again, see you soon. Right, next we will be joined by, I think, a slightly more right-wing Tory MP. Don't go anywhere. Joining me now is Danny Kruger, Conservative MP for East Wiltshire. Danny, Never Mind The Ballots debut, welcome.
Thanks, Harry.
Are you running? Everyone else seems to be.
No. Sadly, I'm resisting that temptation.
Who are you backing?
So I'm going to back Rob Jenrick, who was Immigration Minister at the end of the last government, but then he left the government because he felt that the policy on illegal migration wouldn't work.
Yes.
And I'm afraid he was proved right. But he's also the candidate, I think, that can best unite us, because the challenge we've got is to win back those voters we've lost to reform, but also hold the centre of the party together and convince those wavering voters in the middle who might have left to the Lib Dems or even Labour that we're actually a responsible and competent party of government. And I think Rob manages that. He's got the competence and the personality and the temperament, and also he's got the right policy position.
Been on a bit of a journey though, isn't he? I would have to remember when he was Rishi Sunak's best mate, voted Remain, seen as a bit of a sort of, soft left of the party, and now he's the hardline Mr. Let's leave the ECHR, isn't he?
Well, it's a shame that it's seen as hardline and right wing to want to restore sovereignty and control of our borders. What Rob has done has gone on the journey that the whole Conservative Party needs to go on, because it's the journey that the electorate has gone on, the electorate who we need to win back. And I think the fact that he was a loyal, sensible, very capable minister in governments under Cameron and Theresa and Boris and the rest of them shows his capability and his loyalty to the party. But he recognised, as I think we all needed to at the time, that our policy on both legal and illegal migration wasn't working. And in the recent years, the country has lost faith in our ability to manage our borders. There's a whole range of other issues as well, which I think he can speak to very well. But on that essential one about trust, about delivering on the sovereignty that the people requested when they voted for Brexit and when they voted for Boris, I think Rob speaks to that issue much better than the other candidates, bluntly, because I think he's demonstrated his commitment to it.
Is the ECHR going to be the sort of defining point? And traditionally in Tory leadership elections, essentially, the most Eurosceptic candidate would always used to win, but pre-Brexit. And then it's the sort of most sort of, migration is clearly a massive issue. We'll talk about reform in a moment. But is the ECHR going to be the sort of political football that's kicked around in this debate, and the person that, takes the hardest line on that will be the one that wins the members, do you think?
I don't think it's a question of taking the hardest line. And I want to just challenge the idea that it's about being more right-wing. Actually, I don't think we lost the election because we weren't right-wing enough. We lost the election because we were incompetent in government. And in order to restore competence, we need to do things which might appear right-wing, like reassert our control of our borders and our laws, and take a much more robust position on migration. But actually, that's the common ground where the British public are.
Yeah.
On the ECHR, yes. I don't think that we're ever going to win back public trust unless we announce that we're going to leave the ECHR in some form. There are ways to do that, and I don't think we need to be, breastbeating about it and have some sort of virility contest about how anti the ECHR we are. But I do think the ECHR is incompatible with sovereignty and with good government. How do we enforce security, counter-terrorism, as well as all the other issues around migration, while we're bound into this convention, which obviously the text of the convention everybody is fine with. It's the way it's been interpreted in Strasbourg and, I'm afraid, by British courts since the Human Rights Act.
But you can imagine, you thought Brexit was a lot of shouting. You can imagine the BBC, the Guardian, the legal establishment, the for use of a better term, the blob, they will go absolutely bananas.
Well, listen, I don't want a battle.
Right?
I don't want a massive battle. I don't think sort of institutional warfare is helpful. But frankly, if that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. And politically speaking, bring it on. I would love to see Keir Starmer stand up and defend the rights of terrorists, foreign criminals.
Well, he literally took the knee to the ECHR. He literally stood in front of European leaders last week and said, I will never, ever, ever leave.
And indeed, his whole political philosophy is about the primacy of international human rights law.
Yeah.
That's basically what he came into politics for. The Human Rights Act that Blair brought in.
Yeah.
That was his moment. That's what he believes in more fundamentally than anything else, not in Parliament. I mean, when he was asked, would he prefer Westminster or Davos? He said Davos. He is an internationalist. And we are sovereigntists in the Conservative Party, and I think the public are too. So, frankly, I would welcome a battle over the ECHR, but we need to do it in a measured and sensible way and bring the public with us. But I think the public are pretty much there. They recognise that we can't stay in this arrangement, but we need to execute our departure in a way that's consistent with our alliances internationally as well.
Talking of alliances, yes, not singing the same tunes quite as such, but, Nigel Farage's maiden speech this week stood up and said we need a referendum on the ECHR. Yeah. Is there a path to an alliance with reform, those 4.5 million voters that went over, but most of them, probably could have been won back by the Tories, not all of them, but most of them. Is there a path to alliance with Farage within this parliament, do you think?
Well, I think we've got to have an alliance with those voters. And the reason I back Rob Jenrick, because he and I, as on the backbenches, were arguing for a much more robust position on illegal migration in the last parliament, basically derogating from the ECHR. I think if we'd done that, we wouldn't have lost on the scale we did. And that's why the voters abandoned us. So, no, our alliance, our coalition needs to be with those voters. Not all of them were Conservative.
But what about Farage and the Reform Five?
No. I mean, Nigel, I honour him for his contribution to the great Brexit victory. But no, he's committed to a different path. He wants to replace the Conservative Party. He's stood against us in the election. He doesn't want to join the Conservative Party. He's made no indication of wanting to have an alliance with us. So no, I don't think we should focus. I mean, allow him to. He won his seats.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be forming alliances with other parties. We want to make an appeal to all of the voters who backed us in 2019 to say we are very sorry and that we can make our excuses, which are legitimate, about COVID and all the other reasons why it was so difficult to deliver in the last Parliament. But frankly, we lost those voters because we didn't deliver, and we need to demonstrate that we can again. It's not about doing deals.
How's Rob Jenrick going to spin the fact that he was, you say the Tories were incompetent in power, you didn't deliver, you didn't fix the borders, you didn't do all these things, but he was there in the cabinet throughout this for a large part of time. He was the borders minister. What's his sort of justification for?
Well, that's why he left, Harry. So that's why. I mean, he was loyal to Rishi Sunak, loyal to previous leaders, and that's a very important trait I think that he has. But in government, for months and months, he was arguing for a much more robust position, both on legal migration, which eventually he got, by the way, but also on illegal migration. And he could not persuade the Prime Minister and his colleagues to agree to a position on the Rwanda policy that would enable it to actually work.
Yeah.
And so he did the honourable thing, very difficult thing for a loyalist, to leave the government on a point of principle.
Yeah.
And so I think he's the only one who was still in government. Suella's the other one as well, by the way.
So what happened there? Because I thought you were quite close to her.
Well, I am.
originally.
I have great respect and affection personally for Suella, but I think Rob is the one who can actually unite us.
Don't think she can win?
Well, I think Rob is the one who can unite us.
Right.
I think he can demonstrate that partly because of the journey he's been on, as I say, his roots are, as it were, in the centre of the party, and that if you don't know if you would have watched your rival Nick Robinson's interview the other day, but
never miss it.
But Rob articulated his own background as the son of self-made business people, with self-confessed provincial values. He is Middle England. He speaks for that.
Yeah.
I think that traditional
Sigh of relief when he gets
principle.
off the platform in Nottingham rather than being in London.
Yes, and I think he can hold our coalition together, and that's what the Conservative Party is at its best. It's a successful coalition of different interests and geographies and political philosophies that all combine under a heading of the patriotic Conservative Party. And he's a decent minister.
Can they do it in 5 years, though? Can the Tories really, from the scale of that defeat, what it took 13 years to come back after 97, and then this is worse than 97, it's going to take a while.
Well, it's not worse than 97 in reality. Blair won that election. Starmer didn't win this. We lost it. We lost it because we lost it very badly in terms of seats, but actually the votes. Starmer got no more votes than Jeremy Corbyn. In a lot of those constituencies where they have Labour MPs, they have very small majorities. And those, as Gareth Davis was just telling you, those voters have demonstrated that they don't have tribal loyalties to any political party. And I think this is a Conservative country deep down, as Tony Blair himself recognised.
Yeah.
I don't think Starmer is a Conservative. Certainly the Labour Party behind him is not. And he can, I think, we can demonstrate that we stand for the values of the British people, but we need to demonstrate competence and trust again. I think we can do it. We can get back in 5 years if we unite behind a credible leader who speaks particularly to that part of the electorate which is so disappointed by what we've done on migration.
Is there? I mean, you're going to spend the summer. This leadership election is going until September. You're going to spend the summer kicking 7 shades of. I'm going to say it. 7 shades of shit out of each other, and then all the meantime, the government's, abolishing the Bibi Stockholm, scrapping a Rwanda scheme. They won't even say illegal migration today. It's a regular migration now, apparently.
That's right.
Isn't the problem you're going to spend the whole summer arguing amongst yourselves while, God knows.
Well, that's what's got to happen. I mean, let's just be real, Harry. The fact is, we've just lost a big election.
Yeah.
Gareth was totally right. We can't just rush into choosing a new leader just because we need to oppose the government. We will do that anyway. Rishi Sunak is doing that very well already. So are the rest of us. We absolutely know what the problem is, what Labour are going to do. And we're all united on that. I don't think we're going to be kicking the hell out of each other. I think.
Really?
No. Well, you might do a little bit privately, but in reality, actually, I mean, I'm quite impressed. I mean, there's been a bit of friction in the media, but bluntly, actually, we are all united about. We understand what needs to be done. I don't disagree with a word that Gareth just said, by the way, and he's more in the centre of the party than I am. I think we all have a fairly common diagnosis of the problem. We need to tease it out what the actual strategy needs to be. But I'm hopeful that the leader will emerge from what will actually be quite a consensual process, and that's why we're doing it, taking quite a long time to do it. And crucially, we're going to involve the members properly in the conversations over the summer, and then they have the final say.
So a summer of hustings and awaits.
That's right. Yes.
I can't wait.
Exactly,
yes. Never mind the ballots. We'll be back in September, so we'll see where we go. Danny Kruger, thanks for coming. Come again soon.
Thanks.
Cheers. Right, don't go away. More elections over the pond. Now, let's set our sights stateside on the race for the White House as Kamala Harris inches closer to the Democratic Party's candidacy. Joining me now in the studio is Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas, and live from Clarkstown in New York, former New York State Senator David Carlucci. Thank you for joining us, David. Jennifer, to you first. Absolute disaster for Trump, this isn't it? He had everything planned to take on Sleepy Joe. Now he's got to rip it all up and start again as the older guy in the race.
Yeah, the older guy in the race, that is one thing they now have going for them. However, they still have the same policies, which are the voting issues, which are economy, inflation, and number 2, the border, right? The crisis we have at our southern border, which Kamala Harris was tasked with looking into, and she failed miserably on that. So, Yes, it would have been slightly easier to run against Joe Biden.
But that's not what Trump's saying. He's like, oh, Kamala, I can beat her. She's easy.
Well, exactly. I was going to say she's the second person, but my view is I don't think she'll end up being the candidate. No, I don't.
Oh, wow. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think the Democratic voters who have been totally cast aside in this coronation process are going to rise up and say we do not accept the party grandees.
They seem to be pretty united of either at the moment.
Well, that's
publicly.
what you see on TV.
Yeah.
But don't forget 14 million people voted for Joe Biden in this quasi-primary they had, which was not a real primary. They canceled Democratic primaries in North Carolina, in Florida. They changed 60 laws to keep people like Bobby Kennedy Jr. and others off the ballot. So this is not democracy. And the voters have been left behind. So watch this space.
Let's talk to David about that. David, you there? Kamala Harris going to be the candidate?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, she's on a roll. She's already secured close to 3,000 delegates that have pledged to now support her. You only need 1,976 to clinch the nomination. So now it turns to who the vice presidential pick will be. And to say that Democrats are upset, I think nothing could be further than the truth. Democrats were united in supporting President Biden, the Biden-Harris administration. And now that Biden has stepped aside, you have seen a flood of support go to Kamala Harris. In fact, since the time that Biden has stepped aside, just a few days ago, over 1 million people have made contributions, and they've raised over $250 million between all the types of PACs that are involved with the Kamala Harris campaign. So it's an exciting time for Democrats.
But David, isn't the problem that, a week ago, less than a week ago, the Democrats were saying, oh no, Joe's going to be the candidate, Biden's great, nothing to see here, no problems, everything's fine, he's not pulling out. And then he pulls out, and the very same people that were saying that are now saying, oh, Kamala is brilliant, she's the best, we're really happy, she's who we actually wanted. Isn't there a credibility gap in your party at the moment?
Oh, I don't think so. Look, any candidate, you're in it until you're not. And what are you going to do? Say, well, maybe I'll be in it, maybe I won't. No politician worth their salt is going to do that. But what's funny is the same problems. I got to hear you talk with some of your members today, and you have the same problems in the UK that you have in the United States. And to blame Joe Biden for inflation or for the border issues is just absurd. And the American people know that Joe Biden, the Biden-Harris administration has worked hard on these issues, has proven results, and now Kamala Harris gets to inherit that platform and those results, but has the energy and the vigor to articulate these issues and really bring that to Donald Trump and the American people to make that decision.
Jennifer, Kamala Harris has got the vigor and the energy to take on Trump?
I agree with the vigor and the energy, absolutely. And there's a huge bounce, and it's a relief. It's a relief, sort of all of the donations that you're seeing and the excitement around her. So I think that'll last for a few days, maybe a week. And then it'll die down because people will look and see that the Biden-Harris ticket on day one, when they got into office in 2021, put a line through all of the wonderful Trump border policies, whether it's remain in Mexico or the others. And since then, we've had 10 million illegal people come through the border. Those are the voting issues. That is going to supersede whether Kamala Harris is a woman or younger or whatever. People like the Trump policies better, and that's what's going to win. The other thing to take into consideration, and Harry, you just touched on it with credibility, is Kamala Harris, as recently as last week, was telling people there was nothing wrong with Joe Biden's mental capacity, nothing wrong with his cognitive decline. She is completely complicit in the cover-up that's been going on within the Democratic Party and the media until that fateful debate.
David, you're part of the cover-up?
There's no cover-up. Look, and we all agree that Joe Biden can do the job. The problem is that his debate performance was a disaster. And we saw that.
Do you reckon that's the only reason he stepped down is because of that debate?
Yeah, well, President Biden is getting older. He doesn't have the same pep in his step, but he's been able to deliver on the things that he has talked about. Look, when President Trump was in charge, the United States economy was in a tailspin. We were losing more jobs than was imaginable. Inflation started to peak up. The economy was rolling out of control. Joe Biden took the helm and was able to create one of the strongest economies on the face of the planet. Look, inflation is happening around the globe. Immigration issues are happening around the globe. To say that's uniquely Joe Biden's fault is absurd. And yet Donald Trump is very good at pointing out the problems, like my friend here has said, but he has no solution. Remain in Mexico, that's up to Mexico. Title 42, that was the Supreme Court that said you can't do it. So these issues, yes, Donald Trump has been very effective at getting people angry and excited, but he has no real plan to fix it other than elect him and he'll change everything.
David,
and the American people are not that stupid.
Just on the point you made, just picking up on the point of Joe Biden, though, if he's not capable to be the candidate, if he's not fit enough to be a candidate and fit enough to do the next 4 years, why is he fit enough now to stay in office as a lame duck for 6 months?
It's purely a political decision. We think he is a great commander-in-chief. He's been able to deliver on results. He just had the NATO summit that was extremely successful.
He called Zelensky Biden at it.
Hey,
I've just done it as well now. He called Zelensky Putin. See, maybe
exactly.
I better resign.
Yeah, exactly, right? If we say one slip, if you take Donald Trump, one of his rallies, and we splice just a few seconds or a few minutes of his 2-hour rambles, we will have tons of stuff to play with. That doesn't make a good commander-in-chief. Maybe it makes a good anchor on a TV show, but it doesn't matter about your presidential abilities. He's more than capable to serve out the term till the end of the year. I believe he can go beyond that, but this was purely a political calculation. Many Democrats were concerned that he just wasn't able to articulate as well as someone younger could the problems with a Trump presidency.
Jennifer, how would Kamala Harris fare Donald Trump fare in a debate against Kamala Harris? Were you looking forward to it?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure those people who remember the 2020 presidential...
She's going to go for him, though, isn't she?
Well, OK, but if we remember the 2020 election where she dropped out very early with single digits, and the issue was the more people got to know her as time went on, the lower her ratings went. So, yeah, I am not afraid to have Donald Trump against Kamala Harris.
It's a tricky spot there because he has a bit of an issue where he sort of immediately goes for the very personal. She doesn't strike me as someone that's going to put up with that, David. That's correct. That's
right. She's a former prosecutor. She was the Attorney General of California, largest state in the United States. She's well-disciplined, able to debate. And I think Donald Trump is going to do everything he can to avoid a debate.
He says he is. He said he is going to debate her, though, right?
Was Donald Trump.
He has said
Donald Trump is a horrible debater.
So you think the debates won't happen?
I hope so. I really do. But I don't see Donald Trump following through with it. I think he's going to do everything he can to avoid it. He's a lousy debater. He can't focus his thoughts. He can spend 2 hours rambling. But as we know, it's harder to have a concise thought and speak for 5 minutes rather than ramble for 2 hours, which Donald Trump can do. Look, the second worst debate performance in U.S. history was by Donald Trump the other night. Joe Biden was the worst, but it's not like Donald Trump won. It was that Joe Biden did so bad.
I think the polls would disagree with that, I think. I mean,
Oh, I don't think so. The polls really haven't moved that much. It's only been a fraction of a percent in terms of Biden's decline against Donald Trump.
If everything's so fine, why did you get rid of the guy?
Well, it was a decline. It was a slight decline. But what I'm saying is if we looked at the editorials, if we looked at what the media is saying, you would think Trump would have carried this away. He would have been way ahead. He's not. Donald Trump has not moved up in the polls. Biden moved down slightly. It shows that Donald Trump has a very low ceiling. And now the fight is for those undecided voters that I think Kamala Harris will be able to win over.
Jennifer, Kamala Harris, a black woman winning over the key constituencies that Donald Trump needs to keep the people that left him in 2020 women. I mean, there's an issue there.
I would love to have somebody give Kamala Harris's sort of credentials that do not include woman or black. Like, let's talk about the issues. And I think in those swing states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, where people care about energy, they're not going to love the fact that Kamala Harris, wants to ban fracking, wants to ban new oil drilling. So J.D. Vance and Donald Trump play a lot better in those swing states.
Guys, we'll leave it there. I mean, this is going to rumble on. Come again and see us soon. We'll be going all the way through to November. Jennifer, David, thank you very much. That is it from me for Never Mind the Ballots. And not just for today, for all of August, I'm going to go on holiday. It's been a hell of a couple of months. Remember, subscribe, youtube.com/SomePolitics. We'll be back in September. We'll be doing the US. We'll be doing the Tory leadership race. And we'll be keeping an eye on Keir Starmer's government, of course. Thanks for watching. It's been crazy. See you in the September.